Okay, greetings everyone, and thank you for joining the Montague Barker lecture series. I'm stepping in for myself this afternoon. That may sound strange, but I was not scheduled to be chair, but I'd had Damon So sitting as chair because I was supposed to be taking these 2 weeks off due to shoulder surgery, but that didn't work out, but that's fine because I was going to join anyway because I wanted to hear our speaker today. But before I introduce our speaker, what I like to do is to introduce some of the new publications that are coming out from OCMS. And the first one I want to take a look at is a publication by Sung Chan Kwan, who is our own student, an alumnus of OCMS, and his book is A Missional Reading of the Fourth Gospel, a gospel-driven theology of discipleship. And as it says, the author does not seek to find a predefined mission within the gospel, but seeks to instead to discover the central message of the gospel from a missional point of view. Analyzing the gospel in 4 parts, the author draws implications for mission, particularly for the concept of Missio Dei. The next volume that I want to call attention to is very tricky because I've got several, is Samuel Escobar, an anthology. And for those familiar with OCMS, Samuel Escobar is one of the key thinkers and founders of OCMS itself, and a significant missiological writer from Latin America. And this volume looks at, over the course of a distinguished career spanning over 6 decades, mission theologian Samuel Escobar has published numerous books and hundreds of papers and articles. This anthology brings together a small but representative sample of his thinking, as well as introducing some previously unpublished materials. So between those 2 books, 2 very good works that have been published by OCMS, and I would encourage you to...
Oxfordista tulee missiologia luento.
Okay.
Teen sitä tässä.
Joo, mutta älä
Eikö aika katsoa tuommoisesta teemasta?
Joo, ihan hyvä, mutta mulla on kesken.
I'm going to have to encourage someone to mute their microphone. I'm not sure who it is, but I can, let me just see here. All right, make sure everybody's muted except for Alex. Alex, do not mute yourself. Let me stop share. And I'm very pleased to introduce a distinguished Hong Kong researcher who is currently here in Oxford. Oh, I've got someone here, Tom. Tom, can you mute your microphone? Let me just go to participant. Let me just go there. Just a second, Alex. I'll introduce you.
No problem. No problem.
But I need to mute this microphone. There we go. All right. We all mute. All right, there we go. Dr. Alex Ip, professor, writer, and practitioner in promoting economic justice. He is now teaching at the Divinity School of Chung College, Hong Kong, or Chinese University, Hong Kong. He founded the School of Poverty Caring in 2009 and served as the CEO for a local NGO during 2014 to 2017. His research focuses mainly on Roman economy and its relation to the New Testament interpretation. He has written a number of Chinese books, and one of his recent academic publications includes A Socio-Rhetorical Interpretation of the Letter to Philemon in Light of New Institutional Economics. And that's available through Mohr Siebeck, I think. in 2017. And so with that, I will turn it over to you, Alex. Go ahead and start to share screen and look forward to your lecture.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure and honor to have the opportunity to share in this lecture, and thanks Tom's invitation. I prepared a lot of information. Hope I can have enough time, so I start to time myself, so I make sure I will not be over time. And today, I guess I try to share in a way, it's not only, but of course it's academic dialogue with all the participants, but I hope I can also bring my own testimony, my life, how the text influenced me, not just my research, but how it impact me as a life, so that I share my life and my research to all of you. So I choose one of the most impactful text that in my life, that is the Luke 10, to share. Hope that it can bring every one of you some insights, especially one area which has been long, I think, neglected by New Testament scholars, which is my mission in the research, is to bring about how the economy or economic perspective is also important in the text, and also from the text to have impact to every Christians. So that's the way I designed today's topic, the multi-dimensional mission, which I hope at the end of the presentation, many of you can get what multi-dimensional means, and the term quote unquote see their neighbor. I understand to some of you maybe sound quite curious or strange, that what is all about see the neighbor. Don't we all see our neighbors? And that's exactly why I designed the topics to hope some of you at the end you will see why that is really important in the text and also to our lives. So at the beginning, I have to stop a while, but because I have to share with sound, so then I have to take the sound sharing, because I would like to share several minutes of testimony, which is taped by a Germany missionary, the Mission 21 from Switzerland, because this mission organization is my mother church. Okay, and for his, I forgot how many years celebration, they just try to find some fruits of their mission, and they find me in Hong Kong as their long mission works so far. What do they get from the mission hundreds years ago? So that is the testimony that they take years ago, and I hope to share so that you will get a more dimension, understand of this speaker, and then I will share my works and my insights from the text. So hope I successfully share this video to all of you. I guess I have to share another. Yes. Everybody can hear. I already joined the theological school for a whole year, and every day, nearly every day, I will pass through old ladies who is collecting garbage and cardboard in Hong Kong for a living. They will resell the cardboard. I pass through her every day, but I didn't have one moment to care about her. I saw her, but I didn't really see the lady. Until
the end of the semester, I become less busy. I think it's some kind of responsibility. I have to care about somebody as philological students. So I go to the old lady and I just want to give some money. When my hand is put into my pocket, the old lady just smiled gently and said to me, "Young man, I have enough." That embarrassment, just like the whole world is stopped. And then I realized how long the distance between me and the poor people. About 9 years ago, I found an organization. It's called the School of Caring for Poverty, which focus on the experiential learning to help them to really understand. And by understanding, I mean they can really feel and see what the poor people see and feel. So through this humble tunnel, we would like to remind them, like steps that they have go through different stage. First is to see what the poor people may experiencing now, and through the game, participate in the game, they will experience their problems, their limits, and their difficulties now they are facing. And through all this experience, we really want them to reflect why and what can they do in their livings. We created this game for these young people, family, so that they can have the experience of how hard, how heavy of collecting cardboard. And we will let them guess, after collecting all this heavy cardboard, how much indeed they can get. They will be amazed how little they can get when collecting this such heavy cardboard. My experience of poor is not just about less or incompetitive with others, but sometimes if you come from a poor family, you have the quality of compete with other competitors, but you have lots of disadvantage that you do not have the chance to win. From their testimony, I will see the power of love. That's why from time to time I would like to visit this family. People usually think, where did the energy come from? They think energy comes from resting, consuming, or buying, or accumulating wealth. But as the Bible teach, that our energy not comes from these, but comes from you use what the God gave you. And it's actually realized when I visit different families. You can make other people feel they are loved, they are valuable. And this is the energies come from for me to do actually all my jobs. When I see I can teach well and people feel satisfied in the lessons. And that makes me feel good also at the same time. So I think as a Christian, we have to learn this double perspective of giving and receiving. Is at the same time, not one another, especially not receiving and then I give, but actually giving and then you receive at the same time. In capitalist society, we always just treasure our own happiness. But if you can enjoy other happiness, is it a very smart move? And that is my own story. Although I spend a lot of time in helping people without single dollars return, but I have lots of return from their own happiness, their own satisfactions, and their change, and that makes my life fruitful.
So I hope the video can help every one of you can understand a bit more about what I'm going to say in the following lectures. And so the coming presentation will have several themes. So I will briefly introduce the situation of poverty in Hong Kong and the nature of it, because it's not just about taking poverty as one simple understanding or ideas. It's just like one concept. Poverty is not just a concept. Poverty is a real situation, is complex. And so I want to introduce the nature of it and making use of Thomas Piketty, who did a research specifically on Hong Kong and using some of his data to reveal the complexity or some a relationship between rich and poor, so that I can introduce what I have been using in my research, the Douglas North framework, to understand the economy and the nature of rich and poor. And that framework helps us to understand why I would say people did not really see the poor, even though the poor is all around us. What does it mean by seeing that could possibly be helped by the model of Douglas North? And then we will go into the text interpretation. I'll do some detailed expositions of the text and using some extra textual evidence to help us to understand what could we generate from the text in consideration of the Roman Empire. And finally, I will, as promised in the title, that what inspiration can we generate from the interpretation of the text in this way. So the first sections from the poverty situation in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, we can say Hong Kong is one of the richest, if not country, which is politically incorrect, richest area, I would say, or independent administration zone that among the world. So we have the per capita real GDP of over 60,000 US dollars in 2019, okay, before the COVID. Okay, I think the COVID affects so many numbers. So that's, and we have the largest, one of the largest foreign exchange reserve among the developed countries. And so that if you take into these numbers among Hong Kong, definitely can be classified one of the richest area in the world. However, the rich and poor disparity is really very serious. If we take into consideration of the Gini coefficient, which is a well-standard measurement of the disparity between rich and poor, we have 0.59, which is the highest Gini coefficient among the developed economies. And I think for the past 1 or 2 years, we're still among the top 5th in the world. And just last year, Hong Kong government announced we have 1.65 million people living under the poverty line. The poverty line is defined by the Hong Kong government, but it still have 1.6. The total population in Hong Kong is approaching 8 million. So 1.65 million people living under the poverty line, decided by the government itself, is a very tremendous signal for the seriousness of poverty in Hong Kong. And the photos, it's the real life situation in many people, just like in the video, I visit one of the homes, which is a normal, we call the caged house, or the coffin house in Hong Kong, that people don't even have their own table for their works. And they barely put a bed in their house, and the children will be living in the upstairs, and then their parents in the lower stairs. That is not one of the cases, but thousands of cases are living like that. We have statistics is about 200,000 people are living in home like that in Hong Kong. So that a very simple, today is not an economic lecture, but definitely we have a simple generalization of why could one place with that two kinds of extreme poor and extreme rich, we can say Hong Kong is the, it's one of the reasons we can say is the capitalist values. Hong Kong has been elected as the most free economy by one of the conservative organization in US, which measure all the parameters measuring how free that the people can do business, how free can they take away their money without considering the poor, how free they can do their business in Hong Kong without paying tax among all the economies in the world. So the 26 years consecutively ranked Hong Kong as the most free economy in the world, which is a good indicator of the capitalist values well put forward in Hong Kong, which I will later using North's model to explain a little bit more. What does capitalist value actually means? We cannot only say that it's bad or good, but there are actually different layers of the capital values, and it not just determine the resources distribution, but also it will affect our values and our attitudes towards other people or our neighbors. So let's take a deeper look into the nature of poverty situation in Hong Kong. I borrow the analysis from Thomas Piketty's. He did a research with one of, I think, his colleagues, specifically in Hong Kong, explaining that the nature of poor is one of the reasons for the social unrest for the past few years, which I have published another paper in American, using the similar argument but different model. He used statistics, I used the new institution economics, arguing that there's a real deep economic problem underlying the social unrest in Hong Kong. It's not the whole reasons, but one of the reasons. The first diagram I want to show from Piketty is that you can see clearly that the red line, which representing Hong Kong, the 0.001% of wealth that share, which is much higher than most of the developed country, which means in Hong Kong, the wealth is well concentrated in a very small number of people. And the percentage, which is, I think, it's not just large, but you can see it's exceptionally large among the world standard. And actually in 2014, Hong Kong has been elected as the world's highest, the most chronic capitalism among the world. But after 2014, by the Economist, the magazine Economist, but after 2014, Hong Kong government, because protest against this statistics, so the economists did not rank Hong Kong as an independent area anymore. So after 2014, we don't have an independent number. So we just know that before 2014, we are the most chronic capitalism in the world. And the second table we can see, which is quite clear, that from the left-hand side, we measure the top 1% people, their growth in real wages. And in the second line, the yellow one is the bottom 50%, which I think it well conform to the basic idea of Thomas Piketty in his well-known book, that for those who have capital, their rate of increase will well more than the other wages increase. So that explains a little bit more about why the rich becomes even richer and the poor will become even poorer, and that we can never catch up with the poor people, catch up with the rich people, because the wealth brings much higher increasing rate in their income. So it results in a very, if you cannot find Hong Kong, just look at the top of the diagram, because Hong Kong is jump out of the normal curve, which this diagram measure on the vertical horizontal x-axis is about the net worth as national income, and the horizontal is about national income per adult. So the billionaire in Hong Kong has more than 80% of the wealth as national income, which means the net billionaire in Hong Kong is not just rich, but using world standard is exceptional rich in Hong Kong, and that speaks a lot. After the numbers and diagram, we see some real life in Hong Kong. That picture was took by me in one of the very famous McDonald's in Hong Kong, because this McDonald's open 24 hours every day. And in the poorest area in Hong Kong, which called Sham Shui Po, I think Tom knows that area. Sham Shui Po, it's quite near to the Kowloon Tong, which is a very rich area, but just next to the Kowloon Tong is the poorest area in Hong Kong. And this McDonald's, people who does not have a decent place to live will come here at night, and in Hong Kong we call the Mac-refugees, okay, or Mac-refugees, which means they are living in McDonald's like refugees because they don't have a decent home. Okay, then Hong Kong has several McDonald's like that open 24 hours, and every McDonald's, if they open 24 hours, they will have Mac-refugees like this. So my question comes, okay, if we don't take that as, don't take poverty and poor people living like in this situation for granted, we have to ask this question: how come a rich area or place like Hong Kong can have such a problem be sustained for such a long time and even becoming more and more severe? It's not from the top reducing the severity of the problem, but it's the problem is becoming more and more severe. How can that be happened? That is my core question and one of my mission in Hong Kong. And why can't people see? Do they really see that problem? Some may say yes, everybody can see it. If you walk into the street, you can see homeless. But what exactly means by seeing our neighbor in the Bible? If we really see the problem, will that problem be sustained? That is my core questions and my core mission in the following lecture. Oh, we have to borrow a model from Dr. Snob. Of course, that will be a very simplified descriptions of Knopf's model. That is part of my research here in Oxford, but today let me do a very simple introduction of his model because it helps us a lot to use a new angle to understand why the nature of economy can help us to understand the spiritual problems. Knopf's problem can be simplified in this diagram, okay? It's not a so-called the classical or neoclassical model only focused on market and exchange and explaining the price difference. Knopf's model has been used in many different disciplinaries, including political theology and in also his many classic historian has been using Knopf's model to help to explain not just the traditional economic parameter like price, land, labor, and entrepreneurs, but explain the change of society. And so I borrow it and hope that it can be understandable at this level. Knopf's insight is telling us that an economy actually can be viewed from different institutions, and the ultimate performance of the economy is determined by the cooperation of these institutions. And at the top layers is called the formal institution, which many of us will not be surprised that is about the legal rules, okay? Or you can put political structure into that layers, which is quite fixed. And second is the informal institution, which including the norms and values of the society, which does not put into legal rules, but you understand, like in capitalist society, selfishness seems there's no rules to argue that you have to be selfish, but selfishness or private property, just take care of your own private property to maximize one's private property, seems to be already one of the fundamental values of capitalism. Okay, and the third one is the enforcement practice. All these values and norms has to have some form in our real life that to convey all these values. In Roman economy and in contemporary capital society, we all have that kind of enforcement practice. And finally, it determined people's belief. That is the contact point between the economy and the Bible or our religion, because Christianity definitely concern the belief system of people, how the caring of the poor. But actually, that kind of caring heart is not come out of the blue. It's the result of these different institutions. So to add a little bit more explanation on North's model, we can say something like the formal institution actually determine the winner and loser. And I think it's not hard to understand. If you have a rule to determine who will be the winner and who will be the loser, that definitely affect people's behavior. Just like in Roman economy, if for whom can be the Roman citizens, I think everyone here knows that Roman citizen does not just an identity, it includes a whole bunch of special privilege, a special treatment of the law, and you will get lower tax rate, whatever. So Roman citizens becomes one of the tools that Roman Empire used to help who can be the Roman citizens actually determine people's behavior, because they will be trading as soon as possible to become a Roman citizen, because it's a benefit. It has a whole bunch of benefit behind the citizenship. And informal institutions is important in a society because it helps to justify that kind of rules. The formal rules become reasonable. We can see there are lots of different in different society, we have different norms and values. And these norms of values, not all of them, but many of them, will play a role to justify that kind of legal rules become reasonable. And that's important in our theory, because it is exactly because of these kinds of norms and rules to help people to think these formal rules are reasonable. And just because of they are reasonable, and it makes us less aware the defects of these formal rules. And maybe it's exactly these norms and values make us blind to our need of our neighbor. And the enforcement practice, and I will come to it later, and especially in Roman Empire and also in contemporary society, and people living daily in a society. We walk in a shopping mall. It's not just a shopping mall. Shopping mall has value or conveying values. It enforcing the values of you become the consumers. You have to be rich in order to buy the luxury goods and then to feel good among people. And that kind of, we can say, is the contemporary society's enforcing practice. In Roman economy, we also have similar kinds of enforcing Roman values in the arena, in the agora, which more like a Facebook today, that all the Roman values was, you can see or you can experience in the Colosseum and in the theater, and also in the agora. In the Bible, we also have the same term which translate at marketplace, but actually is talking about the Roman agora. The Pharisees like to be praised or be honored when he walked in the agora. Why? It's because the agora itself is not just a place for buying and selling, it's a place to enforce the Roman values. So that is what I'm talking about, the enforcement practice. And finally, it comes to the believing system, why we perceive something to be right. And that perceptions, sometimes we don't need to think and we just act it out, which is one you can read in the text later, that that part of perception is really important. And if we take into consideration of people's perception, we will find more very interesting point in the New Testament, that addressing that area of people is not just what you did, but something you did not do is also the New Testament will address. So put it into a nutshell, using these ideas, we can have a simple reason or a preliminary reason to explain why people cannot see their neighbors in Hong Kong, because in a free market, in a capitalist society, everybody has a free chance to compete in the free market. If you are not competitive and then makes you become poor, that is reasonable according to the capitalist rationale. Everybody can go into the into this shopping mall to buy. Everybody can are free to go into every shop you like. You just don't have enough money. So that is your problem. It's not mine. So that kind of winners values have penetrated into everybody's mindset and become our perceptions. So just because it's so reasonable and I earn my own money, I earn my property by my own effort, why should I share these values to the poor? What do their life have to do with mine? That is the spiritual problems now we can observe in Hong Kong. So that makes the distinguish between the genuine seeing that we are going to talk about in the Bible and the biological seeing. That's just different. Biologically, we definitely have seen so many poor people in Hong Kong, but spiritually, we didn't really see their need or their connection with our lives. That is what I'm talking about. So going to the first sections of our presentation, going into the text. So this text, because we have named it as the Good Samaritan, which makes us really, because when we name it as Good Samaritan, we put the focus only on what is doing or what has been done by the Samaritan. Actually, this whole passage is much or richer than just following the good deed of the Samaritan. It is affected by some scholar on this text because at the beginning, the other literature that has been introducing these sections has the focus is the argument or the debate in biblical scholar has been focused on the form of this parable, whether it is a parable or it is a so-called a good example. If it is a good example, it's not real parable, then this so-called the Good Samaritan is not bringing us to a new horizon to see something new. It's just doing some good example so that we have to be, we just have to follow what he did. And instead of thinking about what this parable bring a new horizon to us. And Joachim Jeremiah, as a little step further, that he shared a view that we have to take into consideration of the Sips and Laban, the context of the text and the context of the church. I think that is important for us to step a little bit further. This text has to be read. It's not just about whether it's the form of it, but in the Roman context, what could it mean? That is the very important direction we have to look into. So beginning to analyze text, let us to draw some textual characteristics from the text. If we read the text carefully, we can we can find several parallels, or Luke definitely intentionally put some keywords into the text. Just to scan through very quickly, the whole text was beginning with the question about doing. What must I do? Poieo. What must I do to inherit the eternal life? And the whole section is also ending on doing. Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. So doing actually enveloped the whole sections. But the question is, it's not just asking you to do. We will see later, because when also in the middle, when the lawyers is dialogue with Jesus, the lawyer actually understand all the you can say the Old Testament's teachings that we have to love our God, love our neighbor. And Jesus said to him, you have given the right answer, and also asked him, do this and you will live. And the lawyer replied, who is our neighbor? That is a famous question that in this passage. So doing is enveloping the whole passage. And also when Jesus asked the lawyers to do, and the lawyer's replies implies that he did not actually do what he knows, what he has to do, because the Bible has said he wants to justify himself. What did he really want to justify himself? I think that will be reasonable to guess, to justify why he didn't do what he know he has to do, to love his neighbor. Loving God is trivial. Everybody can say they are loving their God. But loving neighbor, you cannot hide, because it's everybody can see whether you have done anything at all. The second parallel is about the polesion. It's about the what we translate as neighbor. It appears in 27, 29, and verses 26. Okay. Today we don't have enough time to go into details about the understanding of polesion, but definitely that polesion is not a general terms, but specifically using to ask us to look into the needies around us. The third parallel is I think is a little bit more implicit, that we can find in the dialogue between Jesus and the lawyers, and also in the parable, that the similarity between the lawyers and the first two person pass over the wounded person, that is about their inaction, that the lawyer know the rules, but he didn't do it. He want to find some reason. And in the parable, the priest and the Levite see the wounded person just next to them, but he chooses to walk away. Okay, so that could be the preliminary observation from the text that we can go into investigation further. So what makes what is the message in this whole text? I suggest we have to go into the narratological layer of the text. We beyond the form, beyond the ships and neighbor, and look in details of the narrative, how Luke rhetorically designed the whole narrative. We can find more evidence that for us to really understand what Luke really means. The critical turn of the passage, I would suggest, is verse 29, when the lawyer asks a question, who is my neighbor? This question actually trying to justify himself of his inaction or apathy about the people around him. And this sudden change, who is my neighbor? And scholars aware of this sudden change, and scholars also providing many answers. Why? Jesus didn't directly answer his question. If he said, who is my neighbor? Why don't Jesus just answer the questions? Okay, here is your neighbor, here is your neighbor, and go ahead to help them. My suggestion is that the question exactly is not about your biological eyes. It's all about our perceptions. It's all about whether we, in our mind, in our deep sense, whether we think, are they really our neighbor? If it's reasonable for the poor to be poor, they are not our neighbor at all. They deserve it. They deserve to be poor because of they are lazy. Because of in the capital society, you don't take good, you don't make good use of the society, the system. That makes you poor. I make use of the opportunity. I become in the Oxford, in the Cambridge, and I become rich. And that makes my property be reasonable and justified. So why should I give my own wealth to those who do not deserve to have it? So-called the loser. That could be one of the reasons to explain why Jesus did not answer the question directly, because it's not about biologically whether they can see, but deep inside the perception of this lawyer. And that exactly is the function of parable. Parable is not, parable's purpose in the Bible is rhetorically to bombard, to give the power to those who cannot see, become who can really see something they originally does not believe in it. So that is my explanation of, I'll give some more reason and to justify that possibility, whether the perception of the lawyer will be like that. And so the parable, what is inside the parable? What is the key message in the parable? We can take into, the one more question is about, to justify my view that we have to answer one question. My point is, the lawyer actually did have so many neighbors around him, but he did not really see it. But is it actually true? Then we have to bring into the recent research of the biblical scholar Stephen Frieson's. It's not actually everybody will believe in it. There's still some controversial among the percentage on, but the controversy now among New Testament scholars is about the percentage of the middle class. I think we can say there's a general consensus about there are very small percentage of the very rich people in the Roman Empire, and quite a lot, you can say 60% or 70%, it depends on your foundation of calculation, that could be, we will say is poor, those who barely subsist in the subsistence level or under the subsistence levels. So in that Frieson's table, that at least we can have very conservative ideas that definitely there are lots of poor people among or around the lawyers. And not just the poor, but if we can take the number of a slave, if we also take slave as person, slave is not just a product. And there are at least 1/3 of people were slave at the time of early Roman Empire. And another 1/3 was freedman, and only 1/3 will be freedman. Then if we take into consideration of this population, poor people, and the number of slavery, we will understand or be more understandable that why would I say that the question from the lawyer itself reveal the deeper question of the lawyer. Who is our neighbor is not the question Jesus wants to address, but why this one cannot see his neighbor, even though there are so many poor around them, there are so many slaves around them. Then why didn't that lawyer see these are their neighbor? My simple answer is that because they are reasonable, poor people or slavery. So taking a deeper look into the text, Luke described the two persons, the priests or the Levites, walk by chance, and then they walk away. Why Luke will emphasize by chance? That also confirmed a little bit more on my suggestion that by chance will give a impression that these two persons didn't need to think, but their perception, their instinct, they saw and then they walk away. They saw and walk away reflect their deep perceptions of whether they need to help or not. So the question comes, so what is the difference between what is so special of the Samaritan? It's not just what he did. The Bible describes in details that he saw and moved with compassion, and then he do whole lots of things on that wounded person. He not just healed him, he used his own carry him to the hotel and paid more than he should pay, okay, and also asked and told the hotel keeper that he will be back. He's not just doing what he need to do, but more than he need to do. So the key, again, what is so special about the Samaritan is not just what he did. Of course, what he did is a good example. There's no doubt about it. But why he will do that is also important for us to compare with the Levites and the priest. He saw and moved with the compassion. That is the origin of his all the doings. And moved with compassion becomes the distinguish or the key point for us to distinguish between the Good Samaritan and the two persons. And let me use one more arguments to support that compassion and seeing is actually very important in the New Testament. In Matthew 9:32, is that he saw the crowd. Jesus saw the crowd. He had compassion for them. That is one of the characteristics of describing Jesus. He saw someone and then he has compassion. The same Greek word, spagna. In Matthew 14, when he's describing Jesus, he went ashore, he saw a great crowd and he had compassion for them and he cured their sickness. So when describing Jesus, the Gospels definitely pair see or saw with the spagna, the compassion that the Good Samaritan has and the priest and the Levite don't have, to make the parable become speaking directly to the problem of the lawyer, that he lacks that compassion that makes him cannot see his neighbor. And Luke 3 chapters earlier than before than the chapter 10, Luke also used the pair. When the Lord saw Idon, he had compassion for her and said to him, "Do not weep." These three sections comes from different sections of the Gospels. It's not synoptics to each other. So it makes it one of the arguments about in the Gospels, whether one really sees actually determined by whether one have that compassion. And where did this compassion comes from? It's, if we look into Samaritan's background, we may have some clues about it. Samaritan definitely is not a Bible teacher, is not a, well, you cannot say his characteristic is not about his training in theological, his training in the legal or the Torah, whatever. I think everyone read the New Testament. When you read Samaritan, you will think about one thing, is his marginalized social status. I think exactly this marginalized status, no matter in the New Testament, when Jesus talked about the Samaritan ladies besides the well, Samaritan definitely symbolize a marginalized religious and social category. And I think exactly this marginalized role, Luke has made use of this to let the lawyer see that it's exactly because of he is living in an area, in a daily life, that everybody, every day, that Samaritan will see the marginalized companion with him or her. That makes him still have that compassion to the wounded, because he was wounded every day by the system, by the prejudice, or by the historical reason. And in nowadays, Hong Kong people experience the same experience, because many Hong Kong people come to UK as like refugees. So we can read in the Hong Kong's WhatsApp group or whatever that we have strong sympathy for Ukraine's situation, because we have the same experience, and that makes us easier to have the compassion for those who are living or experience the same. So it comes to the key questions. In a capital society, many of the rich or those who are already become the winners, they lack the compassion just because we are living in a enforcement practice that, or in the North's model that I hope you still remember, the triangle model, that it explained every poor or the being suppressed are reasonable. That makes us cannot see. And also in the text for the lawyer, who are very likely to be the upper levels, nobles, or you can say in the groups of the winners in the early Roman Empire, his living environment or his belief may easily be affected by the Romans' ideology or the formal and informal institutions. So from that, as the second beginning, that to think about our mission to the poor. Our mission to the poor then is not just about whether we should give enough food to give them better chance to have upward mobility. I think, and I want to share, is that these are all good. This could be our mission to the poor country or to the poor in our own countries, and share gospel, share God's love. That definitely is one of the key. But don't forget, people's compassion could be, and I think should be, also our own mission in this generation. Just because we cannot just focus on material supply to the poor, because I think that is important, but that's not enough. I think I have to go a little bit faster for this diagram. That's just for a reinforcement of to explaining the Roman economy, actually how they generate the poor from the formal institutions, starting from the early Roman Empire. Augustus become more authoritarian. I think that is a well-known in or easily accepted in the classes of historians, and they have to manage the provincial different province. They have to make use of those magistrate or the richer nobles, because they just cannot manage so large areas. So they have to make use of those rich people to give them favor, to earn the loyalty of those local magistrate or the local nobles. That is one of the well-known strategy of the Roman Empire. And in order to justify that kind of management, they make use of the long traditions, honor and shame. They make use of the philosophy about the poor is just because of their bad fate, so and so forth, and the reciprocity of the basic values in the Roman Empire. And the enforcement practiced in the Roman Empire. How could they enforce these kind of values? These values appears in all the games, theaters, which we all know to be just part of the Roman lives. In that games, in every theaters, you will see the reasonable categorization of people. Sitting near the empire will be those senators wearing the purple gown and then the white toga. So actually, the social hierarchy you can really visualize in the games. And the game itself is also conveying the cold-blooded values of Roman, which we all know that the gladiator is not just for entertainment. It's about blood and human body being tortured among themselves and by the beast. These values actually training people to take it for granted of people being suppressed or being bullied. It's just for our special status of Roman citizens. They are just like an object, so and so forth. A long story, I cut it short. And so this model just put a very substantial ideas into a very I jumped the capital society. So go to the final part. So what from the text, if the Samaritan is not just the parable is not just talking about doing, so what could be our mission then? Okay, so I would suggest that instead of just focus on distributive justice and social justice, where what many people has been doing, one on the material things and the other on the political structures, I would suggest a new term is called sympathetic justice, which focus on this exactly what I have been trying to establish is about the seeing part, making people seeing the poor, the suppressed as their neighbor is what I call the sympathetic justice. And it's not easy because the existing institutions rationalize the suppression itself and rationalize those people who is being suppressed. It's their own reason, their own fate, and they deserve it, just like slavery. I can kill you in the war. I didn't kill you and saved your lives to make you become slave in the Roman. That is reasonable to have slaves. That all kinds of reason has been, we can see that, okay? So our mission comes to encountering all these kind of, in capital society, competition, is it fair? I didn't think so. And I don't have enough time to explain in detail about it. And second mission is about how to make people really see, is to help to take away their label or prejudice to those who are suppressed. And we can see now with the social media prevailing in our society, it definitely is more easier to establish all those prejudice and labeling to those who are suppressed. It's reasonable to invade Ukraine. That we can see the social media has been that camp of ideas. Similar in Hong Kong's past several years, it's reasonable to suppress those who are riot. So our mission is not just to help the poor, but help them to take away the label, stick on them. Our mission also has to address the selfish spirituality. I've been involving in social enterprise movement in Hong Kong for, I think, for the past 10 years also with those who are doing business. I help them to find the biblical values behind why those businessmen has an obligation and also a mission to do the social enterprise. That what does social enterprise mean? I think many of you already know that it is a business, but also with the social values or the biblical values for those Christians. And that is important I'm not asking everybody to get rid of the capital society, but make use of the structure. We can still work out our own mission. Fake mission, that is consumerism replacing the genuine loving our neighbor, or all kinds of biblical values is also implanted or embedded in the capital society. We have to be very careful about that, and I will see that as my own vision too. Okay, it comes to the end. To me, as Paul said 2 times in Galatians 5, chapter 5, 13 to 14, loving our neighbor is not just one of our mission, but the greatest among all missions. I think that is so important. So let me conclude by why I would say multi-dimensional mission, and just exactly because when we are living in this capital society, I don't think poor will disappear before the Lord is coming again. The suppression is still going on, but we are called to help the poor, to respond to the unfair justice society, and also to making more people to have the compassion to those needy. And that is what I am now doing in 3 areas. In my research, I try my best to find the biblical values that can strengthen that the biblical writer did have that intention to ask us to respond to that kind of suppression. And I keep doing that kind of experiential learning that the school we have just seen, and also the social enterprise movement. And finally, I try my best to push these values, or to share these values to the church, and using publications, YouTube channels, and Facebook pages to share to more general Christians, so that they can share this area, this mission too. And that's my final words today, just 1 hour. And I hope this sharing is not just an academic exchange, but also open some new area for all of you to think about our own mission and maybe our academic work in this direction. Okay, thanks, Tom. And that's my presentation today.
Well, great, Alex, and a fantastic presentation, and it's so fitting, just in terms of what we do at OCMS and your own work. Now, for everybody here, we have a good period now, and we can have a time of questions, comments, and going back and forth. And if you want to do that, down at the bottom of your screen, there's a reactions button, and if you push that, you'll see a raise hands. I'm going to do that for myself. And that's what it looks like. And that lets me know that you're interested in putting a question or a comment to Alex. And let me begin. Fascinated by the research and studies, and really helpful. One of the things about any parable is you have an intended audience. And with Luke, that's got to be a very complicated question. Because it's certainly not necessarily the people who Jesus would have been speaking to, but it probably would have been people of the church. And so when the figures of the priest and the Levite are going by, there would have been familiarity of who they represented. But how, in terms of the church and a sense of developing sympathetic justice, and who is my neighbor, what's your sense of the passage in light of that intended audience? And also then how might that play over in terms of our own preaching and teaching today, in terms of who should we direct this message to, and what would be its implication in terms of our own engagement in mission, compassion, and sympathetic justice with those in need and of the poor?
Oh, thanks, Tom. If I understand correctly, there's 2 layers of your question. One is historical, and the other is contemporary mission. So historical part, I guess if we take into consideration of the impact of Roman Empire and the Roman Empire's penetration of his values into every part of our life, that I think to say church in the first century, it's especially for the first church, or we would say the first group of, no matter it's about the disciple or the church for the Lucan communities, the Roman Empire's impact is still should be enormous. And the church themselves, their values or their own self-identity is not strong enough. No matter, I jump over the controversy about whether there is rich and poor in the Lucan communities, but the key is, are they or were they being affected or threatened by the Roman Empire's values? My guess is definite, yes. If no matter they're rich or they're poor, they also face the strong values that every day they go out to the agora, they will see Christian, I will not say shameful, but definitely is not honored status. Don't talk about the later the Christian is being taken to the being part of the gladiator show. Okay, so in that sense, that message definitely speaking to everybody in the early Christians for the Lucan community. And for contemporary, I do think it's important because and Luke 10 is just one of the sections what I share today. But if you use this direction, you will find quite a lot of like a book I wrote before is about Philippians. It's addressing the same things about these kind of values and institution and daily life, daily routine actually is our, I will not say enemy, but a counter spiritual training institutions. If Christian organization, OCMS or Divinity School is aiming at training people's spirituality, we have to remember this daily life is another area that people's spirituality are being trained unintentionally. So why, as I said, why Jesus has to use a parable to impact the lawyer, just because we are so natural, we are so comfortable living in this contemporary society already. So a parable actually is just to using something quite triggering our thoughts and then to set impact to our lives.
Good. Well, thank you, Alex. Marina, go ahead.
Hi, Marina. Hi.
Are you muted, Marina?
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. What caught my eye on my thought was when you said that labels make us blind, poor or lazy, label makes us easily to be manipulated. And you also said that, it's not a personal sin. So I can fully agree that, economic injustices is prevalent in a systematic structure. It is a systematic injustice and oppression. So in that context, I was also thinking about, how in some areas, in some traditions of Christianity and Christian faith and practice, there is a dichotomy that has been created between mission in mission and evangelism, which means, if saving soul, you're looking after the spirituality of a person, their faith and how they practice it. Okay, practice it within quote. And then you have a separation which has been created, like economic justice, ecology, and upliftment of the poor and so on, which would come under the tag of developmental work. So I'm trying to imagine how would you overcome this dichotomy that exists in Christian circles? You have very well put it, like saying that it's my multidimensional mission. But is it really possible for the church in contemporary days where there is a clear division?
Yeah, I think Marina asked a very good question. I think for the past 10 years, I faced this dichotomy in Hong Kong too. Hong Kong has two polar. One is, okay, I preach the gospel and then saving soul. That is my own mission. I think that is, we all understand the evangelical mission of many of the churches. And the other will focus on, okay, helping the poor, giving them food. Without life, they cannot believe in the gospel. And then sometimes they cannot dialogue with each other. And for the past 10 years, I tried very hard to try to show there is a spiritual dimension that can bridge both. It's not just to, I definitely value to share the gospel. That is definitely important. But it's not just these two polar. I would like to share one more options that that is not just material and the spiritual, but also in the middle of it that we can address. And I think that I'm not saying that it solved the economy, the problem of the economy, but it helped to broaden our horizon, that there is more choices. And for the past 10 years, I involving in the social enterprise movement in Hong Kong. And that definitely gives some very important examples, which I just say one very simple one. When I, with a group of businessmen, they started a restaurant, Thai restaurant actually, to employ the Thai refugees in Hong Kong who do not have works because they have to take holidays on Sunday. And in the process of employing these refugees, these Thai refugees slowly understand God's love in the process. And in the process of being loved, and these Thai refugees, many of them become Christians. And at the same time, the owners who are originally just a businessman, because they participate in this loving act, many of them 3 years later, they can share their testimony. They really values in doing a business, it's not just earning money, it can spread love. And this example actually bridged the gap that we can at the same time that doing kind of creative things like that to transform people's spirituality. And at the same time, we can also share the gospel to those who are needy. And but it's hard, I will agree. It's not easy, definitely.
I don't see any hands up yet, but I think there will be more coming.
Yeah,
there we go. Let's go to David Singh. Go ahead, David.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, 葉博士你好。
Hi, hello.
Ben Pui from the GRP program. Just following on what Marina said, there's a big division between mission studies, missiology, and public theology. And I think a lot of what you said really is in the area of public theology, but there's so little in seminary training, in pastors training, or even in mission leaders training in terms of understanding public policy, understanding government. A lot of the issues you said about sympathetic justice of neighbors are really the fallout of public policy. And the church and Christians oftentimes, well, this is not true around the world, but oftentimes would stay away from politics, would not run for office, would not step into an elected role, would meet with civil servants and not know how to dialogue, or Christians who are policemen, who are in the civil service, who really don't know how to apply their faith into public policy making and don't really have the resources, whether it's church or pastors, to be able to help them dialogue in that way. I say that because I was at CGST, China Graduate School of Theology, Zhongshan, in Hong Kong for many years, and we reached out and did a Bible study with the Hong Kong Civil Service senior civil servants, quietly in their offices, for the Christian civil servants to really wrestle with the issue. But then when you go down to the ground, it gets implemented. The Christian community around Sam Shui Po, for example, might be very sympathetic in terms of running shelters and soup kitchens, but not really able to think or dialogue any deeper in terms of social policy or working in civic society with NGOs in a way that could interface with public policy. So I mean, everything that you said is great. I'm just thinking, where do we go from here to encourage more of missions and missiology, mission studies, to start to interface and overlap with public policy, public theology, which kind of sits in a very strange space that's not as well known.
Yeah, thanks. I totally agree with the gap between these two two groups of in terms of knowledge, in terms of their previous visions, their training. That's not easy, but I don't have an answer, honestly, but I do have some positive experience. Sometimes it's very difficult to come up with an intellectual consensus. I think everyone here will agree. It's always difficult, especially for those who are intellectual. Disagreement is always more easier to generate than agreement. But experience is powerful, I would say. I see many times when I deliver the programs of the school I founded previously, and some they hide their name. They're actually tycoons in Hong Kong. They come to join our experience, our experience, and finally, when they join the groups with some Sherpa or whatever, I forgot about that, the brother and sister there, when they have similar experience, I think that the experience itself become the common pool or common, you can say, affections or feelings to make them easier to dialogue with each others. And I do see some, it's not about the policy layers. I understand what you're saying, that in terms of discussing which policy or it will come a long time, trust, and also, but I would say experience still is the essential part, because without genuinely step into others' shoes, I think most of the discussion sometimes is very difficult. Just like today, I try to share a video before my presentation, just to help to increase or to make everybody at least understanding Hong Kong situations and what pool is it all about, and then we can share something in common, and then we can discuss in later. But I have to admit that I don't have an answer at the moment, but I definitely think that experience can help. That's why I try very hard to create creative mode to invite people to join in action before putting them together to come to an agreement on what should or what should not. And that I hope this is a new direction that we can come to think, or to think about missiology experience. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Ben, for that good question. Good to see Ben Pui here. I spent a lot of time in Singapore as well. One of the things that you don't touch on, but one of the things I was fascinated by, because I did work with the Singapore churches and was involved and member of a Singapore church for a long time, is that I really did a lot of looking back at the family lines and the development of Christianity in Singapore, especially among the Singapore Chinese populations. And one of the things you find is most of the people within those congregations did not come out of the rich, but come from either very working class or early merchants, but very close to the bottom, more towards the bottom sectors of your, if you're going to put it in a Singapore compared to the Roman society. But slowly, gradually, the ways of thinking, the ways of being, the ways of living life developed at a burgeoning middle class of people who develop certain virtues, certain habits, certain ways of being in the world that created agency and power. Now, what I found fascinating about your talk, Alex, I'm not sure that's ever really necessarily seen as part of the gospel, but almost an effect of the gospel. But it's what struck me, and one of the areas I'm working on right now, is the relationship between faith and agency. And not just in Christian circles, but in Muslim circles and others, where we actually find in very poor communities that the kind of character that's built within faith communities actually begins to build powers to become successful agents in society. I've been looking at this whole thing about Muslims in Birmingham and how sadly the schools got shut down, but schools went from the bottom 4% of the poorest areas in Birmingham to being schools that were in the top 78th percentile within the English school system, but then were shut down because they were seen as Islamicist. Okay, so my concern is a little bit two ways, in the sense that from a pure secular systematic view, they don't see the kind of empowerment that comes through the adaptation and the embodiment of faith with practical relationships going forward. And then further, the church doesn't necessarily make that part of mission in terms of building up poor communities so that they can grow in stature and agency, as well as assistance and compassion for those of like circumstance.
Yeah, I definitely, the agency is important, and the form, I think it touched the one area that I think I'm not a mission training, but I think we have to start to value the importance of agency and also the form deliver the values, because in the world, if we separate the two, okay, church and the world, I don't think it's good way, but it's easier to present my ideas. The world actually has many forms to deliver their values in every day, so they have stronger impact to affect Christians. So as a mission mind thinking, I think we do start to think about the form and agency to deliver our Christian message, no matter what. We may not agree with one set of mission values, but I do agree that in order to think about missiology, it's not just about why and values, but how it delivers is also important. That's why I emphasize the experience and also creative form. Yeah, I think David has a question.
Yeah, David Singh, you had your hand raised. David, will you join back in?
David, you're on mute. David, you're on mute.
David Singh, are you on mute?
David, you're on mute.
I see you're.
Yeah, David is mute. Yeah.
Yeah, David Singh, you're on mute. I know he hears us, so he may be having a hard time getting off mute.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can unmute David. All right, just a second. Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Go ahead, David.
So I guess my question is based on the other component, to the other side of the argument, and that is that is the poor. And I'm just wondering what the poor should do in order to experience change. Because for obvious reasons, the focus of your lecture really was on us as agents of change, and you're absolutely right in saying that we can't just continue to focus on cognitive dimensions. We need to also incorporate affective and intensive interactions, allow intensive interactions to take place between us and the poor, in order to be able to see the poor in the first place before we can do anything else. But I'm just wondering, what should the poor do in order to experience change? And why is it that some poor people are able to change their circumstances whereas the others can't. Are there any conditions for positive changes or positive responses to take place?
Yeah, thanks, David's question. That is a very grand that we have to work with. But I just share some personal experience. To the first question, I think is much simpler than the second question. That I think empowerment is very important because we have in my lecture, I didn't share how the poor should be taken care of in that situation. But in my experience, like the school of caring for poverty, we invite the poor themselves as the leader to lead the discussion, to share their own experience on condition that they love to. And one experience is that we actually asked I think it's over 60 years old, an old lady who collect cardboard in Hong Kong. We organize activities like we call the live library, and we asked her to share his cardboard collecting experience, which impressed a lot. We didn't give any money for her, but in this process of being understood, being heard, actually help to dilute the effect of the labeling effect of the society, which is not easy. No matter how you praise him by a pastor, oh, you are very nice, you're very good, cannot, or the impact is smaller, much smaller than if you put them in the right position and then they can earn their own respect. But is it possible to do that in every part of the world? I doubt a little bit, because I think we understand not every situation is possible. Some is really worse. It touched the problem of structural sin. It's not just about individual, whether we can give up. Sometimes we don't have the opportunity at all. And at that part, I would say love is the ultimate power. And we have to, it's not a solution, but I think questions at the end, we have to believe that we cannot give the solution in the world standard. In that very words, just like when I visited Myanmar 10 years ago, it's not the worst situation, but definitely it's still hopeless at that moment of time. And I lived with them for 3 weeks. I experienced the hopeless at the end, but they share the testimony to me that you guys come here to visit us becomes the energy for us, for them to be able to go through all these difficulties. It's not a solution, but I think Christians still have to believe the ultimate power of love.
Yeah.
Let's go to Damon. Damon, unmute and go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes. How are you?
Okay. Sorry, I was due to chair your lecture, but I tested positive for COVID. Coughing quite a bit, so I didn't sleep that well last night. But anyway, thank you for your lectures. I think as I listen to you and read the passage again, I see that there are 4 figures in the passage. One is the expert of the law who came to Jesus and asked him, and the other one is a priest, and the third one is a Levi, and the fourth one is of course the Samaritan. Now the first 3, they are supposed to be very spiritual people. They're expert of the law. They're priests and Levites. They should know the law. Compared to the Samaritan, he's not supposed to know the law that much. But he's the one who stands out to be the one who is really acting out the law. So maybe Jesus is trying to shock this expert of the law that you think you know the law. You don't actually know the law. You're supposed to know the law, but you don't. And so we are kind of, because we are familiar, we have that label, we have that position, we delude ourselves by thinking because we are Christian, of course we are loving people. Because of course we do social justice. Of course we are kind. But Jesus kind of shocked us into questioning ourselves. Are we actually doing what Jesus telling us? And I think it's a shocking tactics. And sometimes we are in that delusion, and we need to be shocked out of our system to do something. I mean, the church sometimes are so complacent and so familiar with God's words that we don't actually hear God's word. And so it takes someone to shake us
Yes.
into really understanding what it is.
Yeah.
Because I'm not well, I was watching a documentary before your lecture on Muhammad Ali, where he grew a farm, and the black people and the white people were segregated. And I mean, there are lots of Christians in America, and we have this painful racial divide, for such a long time. And Tom knows better than I'm sure that some of the churches are doing good things, but it still is a staggering thing that with a country with so high percentage of Christian, that they kind of tolerate that kind of system for so long until the 1960s, and even Martin Luther King was murdered. And I'm not saying he's murdered by Christian, but the church seems to, I don't know, seems to have sit side by side with this kind of thing. And the church needs to be shocked into realizing we have not been loving our neighbors. These black people are our neighbors. We need to be shocked. And I think in the Western church, we need to be shocked. I mean, OCMS came about because of the issue of poverty and culture and holistic mission. And it was not welcome when OCMS founders came up. They was just creating too much trouble. And so Christian needs to be regularly shocked into understanding, into compassion and action. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Philemon, for your comment. And I totally agree that we sometimes have to do something shocking other people. In a way, people may see us as stupid. Just like 10 years ago, when I started to start up this school for poverty caring, nobody value it at all. When I invite actually it's my friend, a secondary school principal, that to giving some students for me so that I can take them to experience the poor. He asked me again, are you really taking my students to learn from the poor? In Hong Kong, learning from the rich is reasonable. But learning from the poor, what are you talking about, Alex? But just because he's my friend, he has to give 20 students to me. And I guess those 20 students should be the most naughty one. And I take them to sleep on the street. And you don't know the result. It comes out with that one of the most famous newspapers try to report the story, SCMP in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And after this story, our number of enrollments suddenly jumped.
Yeah.
Because they found the story is in Hong Kong is just like I have no honor in that, just because we're doing something stupid, but with the Christian values, and it comes up to shock people. And I really see God's work, not my work, in that school. Actually, I didn't plan at all, but I just have this compassion to do that.
Yeah.
Let's go with Regina first. All right, go ahead, Regina.
Yeah. Alex, thank you so much. That was just an amazing way that you presented this issue to us today. I basically just have a couple of comments. I think there may be two very prevalent, maybe very dominant attitudes and beliefs, at least in the Western context. And the first one has to do with the whole issue of poverty. I think a lot of people feel that it is so big, and it is a systematic economic inequity so is so great that it's just, how can my on the ground little difference make a difference? And so we tend not to do anything because we don't think one thing we could do could make a difference. And we see that even with the significant number of homeless in the States. Cities just shrug their shoulders and don't really know how to make any effective change there. And then the second thing that I think is kind of more subtle, but I've seen that at least in the context of North America, and that's this idea that the rich here, the rich Christians, tend to think that that is an indication of God's favor and blessing. And so we look at our wealth then as an indication that we're doing something right in the eyes of God. And therefore, if the converse must be true, if they're poor, then they're not in God's favor. And I don't hear that spoken, but I see it in conversations. I see it in the accumulation of possessions. I see it in those material pursuits that are here among Christians, evangelicals. It's very, very prevalent among evangelicals. So I think as I was listening to maybe what was making the difference in the approach that you've taken is this idea that when we go into this in a shared experience where you take your students out on the streets and they're living on the streets, that does more than open their eyes to the real issues going on and how it makes us more compassionate and more caring. And I think there's just the deconstruction that has to take place seems even so large to get our mindsets to reimagine how we can really be this holistic approach to creation, that God cares for every part of our humanity. So I would just wonder what your thoughts are about some of those prevalent thoughts here.
Yeah, thanks, Virginia, for such I think it's a very insightful comment. I myself, I think, face many times from people who agree on the issue of poverty, and with our first comment that how can we do anything about it? And I think to persuade them to agree, first of all, intellectually, I will persuade them as Christian. That is exactly what mission means. Mission is just not the solution. Mission is part of the solution of God's plan. That's my understanding. And also I will share with many people in Hong Kong who are desperate enough not to do anything at all. But I share with them, no, God still have plan, but this plan may not be the solution in your mind. But that definitely has be just like, this is what the Philippians chapter 2, I think Paul is strongly asking that we are stakeholder. We have to stand firm. What exactly means? We can do nothing about the Roman Empire at all. Jesus didn't do anything to shaken the Roman Empire at all, but it brings a world revolution in the spiritual world. That's my belief. But I think in order to persuade them that they can do still think anything, it's still about experience. If we can create some creative means for the businessmen, for the poor, for the middle class, that they still have impact to one person, that one person will become his reason for he still have to do. But if we are sitting in the lecture room persuading to do anything, I don't think that is really persuasive enough for that. The second is about God's rich is God's blessing. I would say yes, but not the whole answer. It's always about how you use your richness or your wealth. Instead of, I don't think wealth, even in Luke, wealth ethics, wealth is good, but not good enough if you use it for selfish purpose. So in Romans, it's always about blessed to be blessing, and not use your blessing in the worldly way. So blessing itself, it's good, but not just like Romans 12, second verse, do not be conformed with this world. Paul doesn't ask us to be poor at all, but if you are rich, use it in a loving way. That's my, I think it's it. And finally, you use a very good term. I think it's worth to be have deeper thought about reimagination. I think we all need to have that room to reimagine our faith in that complicated world. Thanks, Regina.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, good. Well, thank you, Alex. I think it's time to tie a bow on a fantastic session. Excellent conversation by everybody joining in. And we look forward next week to our alumnus, Tim Wambunya of Nigeria, of Kenya, who is now working with the Anglican Church here in England. So Tim's coming in. He will be at chapel tomorrow preaching, and then next week he will be joining us as our lecturer. So again, thank you for joining, and we look forward to seeing you next week. With that, I will bid
Thank
adieu.
you. Okay, see you later. Thank you.
All right.
Blessing. Get well soon, Damon.